Hey guys, I'm Dav, and today I'm back with more Total War Warhammer. We're taking a look at another online battle replay between myself playing as Norsca and a Dwarf player. Been playing around with Norsca a bit recently, trying to get a feel for where they're at in terms of the meta and the tier list of the game. And I definitely think they could be tier 1, they could be considered tier 1. They have a lot of tools to deal with a lot of different factions. The one thing they do lack is consistent healing, however they do have plenty of units with regeneration. So let's take a look at the army composition. I do have 3 marauders with great weapons here that were forming kind of a center line, but I've now detached my forces into 2 groups. We'll put it in slow motion for just a minute here. My forces are led by Wulfrik the Wanderer. On foot, he does have, Seafang and the Hunter of Champions. I also have a Skinwolf Werekin who is guerrilla deployed over here and is going to be coming around to harass the dwarven flank. I also have a Fimir Balefiend with the Lore of Shadows. He has armor sundering, which is going to be a pertinent here, armor piercing attacks as well. And I have brought just the Withering, which is a minus 30 armor and minus 8 leadership. It only affects a single unit, but if you overcast it, it does affect quite a large area of effect. I also have brought the Smoke and Mirrors. You guys know I'm a big fan of this lore attribute. So it gives plus 6% to all my units map-wide, which is very good. And yeah, for support, I also have some Marauders here on the flank. They're backed up by the Miststalker Fimir Warriors, the Regiment of Renown. These guys, they've got armor piercing, again armor sundering. They also have the missile resist buff that the Balefiend has. As well, I've got another unit of Fimir Warriors here to back up these 2 units of Marauder Berserkers and to kind of give a bodyguard to the Balefiend. So the armor sundering, the idea is we use the armor sundering and maybe stack it on top of the Withering to tear away the dwarf armor. That way these Marauder Berserkers can trade effectively versus dwarf units that they would otherwise struggle against because of their armor. And yeah, so we'll see how it works out. I also do have over here, it's way out here on the flank now, this Ice Wolf Chariot. These Ice Wolf Chariots, they do have a ranged attack. It is armor piercing. Generally, however, I'll leave them on fire at will and just use them in melee, basically. Just put them on melee mode and use them as a melee chariot because they do have the Frostbite attack. And they do have 53 weapon strength, only 13 armor piercing, but an 18 bonus versus infantry. So against the dwarfs, they will be able to do quite a bit of damage. And you guys know the dwarfs tend to struggle with chariots, and especially ones that can apply a slow debuff. That means they could potentially get away from the Dragonback Slayers, which my opponent has brought here. For my opponent's build, he's very much got a Dwarf Helm's Deep here, taking advantage of the terrain as much as possible. He does have, it looks like, a Longbeard here, another, just one regular Longbeard, Dwarf Warriors, one on each flank. He does have the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass here, which are a very good pick in this matchup with this fire damage. The Dragonback Slayers, who most people don't think about this ability, but they do imbue this flammable. So they themselves, let's see, so if they're in melee, they will have an attack that gives an additional minus 25% to flame resistance and minus to speed. So not super pertinent in the minus flame resistance just because my guys are already weak to fire, but the speed debuff is pretty important. My opponent has got 2 cannons as well as 2 groups of quarrelers, 2 Longbeards with great weapons, one of them being the Grumbling Guard. A Runelord is his general, as well as 3 miners with blasting charges here in the front. So we're going to kick things off now, and I'm just bringing around the Werekin to pressure my opponent's backline, force him to turn these Quarrelers to respond, maybe draw some cannon fire away from the Balefiends, or excuse me, the Fimir Warriors. You can see they're taking quite a bit of cannon fire now. I already dropped a unit model, and getting some nice work on those Marauders too. I do pull in the Skinwolf Werekin, and he's going to respond with the Dragonback Slayers and the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass, which is pretty much a worst-case scenario for the Skinwolf Werekin. However, even with the fire damage and the anti-large, he's not going to take a ton of damage here with his 88 armor and the regeneration. he will be able to do quite a bit of damage, and he does have armor-piercing attacks, so, I mean, he'll be pretty good against the Dwarves. Because the Slayers were pulled away, however, I was able to get the Chariot around and get a cheeky little charge here into the Quarrelers, do some damage, get into the Iron Drakes, again, do a bit of damage. We're just kind of running around here, trolling a bit, applying the Frostbite debuff so that these units are even slower. Dwarves, when frostbitten, you know, are going to be extremely slow. So now the mainline engagement's about to kick off here. You can see my these Iron Drakes, pretty good pick. I might have failed to mention them, but again, any fire damage against Norsca is generally a good idea. You can see some nice blasting charges going off, some beautiful cinematic action. These Fimir getting in here now, smacking around some dwarves, applying their armor sundering, and we are going to drop this overcast withering, so you can see between the armor sundering and the withering, these miners are now down to only 20 armor. You can see both debuffs being applied here, the withering and the sundered armor, so very good for me. Over here, these units, although they are facing up against armor-piercing marauders, you know, any kind of armor debuff, the Marauders with great weapons still do have 7 regular weapon damage, so although it's not great, we'll help them do a little bit extra. But over here is mainly where it's helping out. These Marauders are going to, the Marauder Berserkers rather, are going to be trading a lot more effectively. This unit of Fimir Warriors is pretty well tattered at this point. They're probably going to be routing off fairly soon, but the Balefiend is still in here, able to sunder armor, and the Skinwolf Werekin is just continuing to tie up the back line. Over here, this flank is getting collapsed pretty hard by the Regiments of Renown here, as well as Wulfrik and the Ice Wolf Chariot doing some great disruption, allowing my guys to get a pretty advantageous engagement. These Marauders with great weapons were getting flamed pretty hard, so I pathed them in, kind of force pathed them onto these Iron Drakes, so that they can't continue to just flame them, and they were doing quite a bit of damage because the Marauders with great weapons obviously lack armor. So we'll go ahead and kick things back into full speed here. So yeah, the armor sundering is working out fairly well on the flanks so far. Marauders with great weapons will be able to beat miners, I think, even one-on-one. Master Rune of Oath and Steel now being used to counter the effects of the armor sundering, which is very good. But over here, where they're out of range of that ability, you can see these Dwarf Warriors got put in a trash can already, and this unit of Longbeards is suffering mightily. Over here, these Quarrelers are getting some nice shots, but the missile resistance of the Miststalkers will help them hold. They will be able to get some kills on the Marauder Berserkers, but now we're pathing through, getting onto the Quarrelers. These Slayers, having finally fended off this Skinwolf Werekin, who looks like he escaped without shattering, they're going to come over here and, let's see, Slayers against Marauder Berserkers would be interesting to test one-on-one, but they are going to be fairly decent in this combat. They'll do okay against the Fimir Warriors and against the Chariots. Definitely, I mean, applicable here, but against just all this, there's so much for them to deal with here, and, you know, being so outnumbered, they are getting beat down pretty hard. They don't have any armor. You know, the physical resistance helps, but they are getting beat down fairly well. You can see a point-blank shot going in, hitting that Chariot. The Chariots are down to only 2 models, it looks like. Nope, still 3, even though they're very low on health. A lot of my opponent's forces getting terror routed off by the Miststalkers, because these Regiments of Renowned Balefiends, or excuse me, Fimir Warriors, I keep calling them Balefiends, but they do cause terror as well as fear, so very, very tough for my opponent. Since he brought mostly low-tier troops, they are going to get terror routed off, despite Dwarves having fairly good leadership. You can see a nice Sea Fang going through there. Skinwolf Werekin here in the back of these Warriors of Dragonfire Pass. Again, not exactly where he wants to be, but just tying them up, applying a nice morale debuff for being attacked in the rear. You can see the Balefiend here is smacking around the Runelord, and I imagine this is a fight that the Balefiend might actually be able to take one-on-one. You can see now the Skinwolf Werekin getting in here on the Runelord, and most of my opponent's forces are in really bad shape. Another Overcast Withering going down, just tearing away at the armor of these last high-value units. We're really aggressively going after the Grumbling Guard, and they're getting torn away in a big hurry. You can see they're down to only 35 armor. Same for these Warriors of Dragonfire Pass, or excuse me, they're at 55 armor. I don't believe they're being sundered, but it does look like they shatter, and the rest of my opponent's forces are going to chain route. So, well played to my opponent. Very enjoyable game. Definitely enjoying playing Norsca and trying out different builds, seeing what works. I think this build is pretty good against the Dwarves. The Fimir Warriors I'm not typically a huge fan of. The ones with great weapons do have an anti-large bonus, but their combat stats overall aren't incredible. They do have pretty decent armor, which is something that the Norskins generally lack. But Against the dwarves, the armor sundering and the armor piercing seems to be pretty good, especially when you pair it with the berserkers. You can see all these berserkers picking up respectable numbers of kills against dwarves, which you would expect them not to be able to perform super well there because of their lack of armor piercing. But with the armor sundering of the Fimir and with the withering from the Balefiend, they're able to perform, on a higher level. These Marauders with great weapons as well, doing fairly well in the front line, taking down those miners. Just across the board, great kills overall. The Ice Wolf Chariot got 29 kills, helped do some major disruption. 38 kills from Wulfrik himself with that Sea Fang. Not incredible, but, it's decent. And the Skin Wolf Werekin, man, he survived a long time. These things are super tanky, and I've said it in previous videos, I do think these guys are a little bit underpriced for what they do. They should probably have a price increase to be a little bit closer to Gorbel, if not maybe 100 to 200 more expensive than Gorbel. But that's just my opinion. You guys will have to let me know what you think. For my opponent's forces, just a little bit got overwhelmed here. Didn't quite have, I understand the temptation with the dwarves to deploy in a very kind of tight pocket like that. But the issue is you run the risk of being surrounded like he did, and he really wasn't able to adequately protect his flanks. And, me being able to pull away those Dragonback Slayers with the Werekin, allowing the Chariot to get in there and do some disruption, as well as just the, when you do go kind of tight like that, you will benefit from more of your own buffs, but as you guys saw, that Withering was able to hit most of his army, and if he was a little bit wider, it wouldn't have been as effective, hitting as many troops at the same time. So, well played. Did enjoy that, and I hope you guys enjoyed watching. If you are enjoying the content, like and subscribe. I'm still trying to grow the channel a bit so that I can get some good news for you guys, maybe get early access when Warhammer 2 comes out, just continue to bring my content to more and more people. So keep sharing with your friends. I appreciate every bit of support. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.